The sun was barely rising over the dusty outskirts of a small town in Texas, casting a faint golden glow across broken fences, quiet barns, and empty fields that had long forgotten prosperity. The air carried a chill, the kind that settled deep into your bones, especially for someone like Samuel Carter. Samuel Carter was an old man, thin and slightly hunched, with wrinkles etched deep into his face like stories no one ever bothered to listen to. His clothes were worn, patched in too many places to count, and his boots, well, they had seen better days decades ago. People in town often called him Old Sam, but rarely with kindness. To most, he was nothing more than a weak, poor, forgotten man who lived on the edges of society. But Samuel Carter hadn't always been this way. As he slowly walked down the dirt road, leaning on a wooden stick he had carved himself, his eyes wandered toward the old ranch at the end of the field. A place that once belonged to him. A place that once held his life together. Years ago, Samuel Carter had been a respected horse trainer, one of the best in the region. People traveled miles just to watch how he could calm even the wildest stallions. But life, as it often does, had taken everything from him piece by piece. First, it was his wife, Margaret Carter, who passed away after a long illness. Then came the debts, the drought, and finally the day he lost his ranch. The town didn't see the fall of a great man. They only saw the result, a poor, aging figure who now collected scrap metal just to afford a meal. That morning, however, something was different. A loud voice echoed from the center of town. "Come one, come all. The annual Wild Mustang Challenge begins today." Samuel Carter stopped walking. The Wild Mustang Challenge, it had been years since he had even thought about it, a dangerous competition where riders attempted to tame and ride the most unpredictable, untamed horses brought in from the wild. The prize? $10,000. To most, it was entertainment. To Samuel Carter, it sounded like a second chance. He stood there for a long moment, his fingers tightening around the wooden stick. His body was weak, his hands slightly trembling, but somewhere deep inside him, something stirred, a memory, a fire. Later that day, the town square was filled with excitement. People gathered around wooden fences, cheering, laughing, placing bets. The smell of dust and sweat filled the air as powerful horses were brought in, their hooves striking the ground with raw energy. Among the crowd stood Samuel Carter, invisible, ignored. A group of young men nearby noticed him and began whispering, "Look at him." One of them chuckled. "Does he even know where he is?" Another added, "Old Sam thinks he can watch. He'll probably fall asleep before anything starts." They laughed. Samuel Carter heard every word, but he didn't react. He simply kept his eyes fixed on the horses. Then, he saw it. A massive black stallion, its muscles tense, eyes wild with rage. It kicked against the wooden barriers, nearly breaking free. Two handlers struggled to keep control. "That one's named Thunder," someone said nearby. "No one's been able to ride him, not even for 5 seconds." Samuel Carter's breathing slowed. Thunder. The way the horse moved, the way it resisted, it reminded him of something. No. Someone, himself, before fear, before loss, before the world convinced him he was weak. The announcer's voice boomed across the field. "Anyone brave enough to ride Thunder will earn double the prize money. But be warned, this horse has thrown every rider who's tried." The crowd roared with excitement, but no one stepped forward, not at first, until a voice, quiet but firm, broke through the noise. "I'll ride him." At first, people didn't even realize who had spoken, but then heads began to turn, and laughter followed almost instantly. Samuel Carter stepped forward, slowly, his worn boots pressing into the dirt. "You?" one man scoffed. "You can barely walk. This isn't a place for jokes, old man," another added. But Samuel Carter didn't stop. Each step felt heavier than the last, yet more certain. When he reached the gate, the handler looked at him with disbelief. "Sir, this horse could kill you." Samuel Carter finally spoke, his voice calm, steady. "Son, life already tried." For a moment, silence spread across the crowd. Something in his voice, something real, made even the loudest critics pause. The handler hesitated, then slowly opened the gate. Thunder roared, kicking violently as Samuel Carter entered the enclosure. The ground shook beneath the horse's power. The crowd held its breath. Samuel Carter didn't rush. He didn't show fear. He simply stood there, watching, waiting. Thunder charged forward suddenly, stopping just inches away from him, letting out a furious snort. Gasps echoed. But Samuel Carter didn't move. Instead, he slowly raised his hand, his fingers trembling not from fear, but from age. "It's all right," he whispered softly. "I understand." No one could hear him. But the horse did for a brief moment, a single fragile moment. Thunder hesitated. The tension in the air shifted. Samuel Carter took one careful step closer. then another. The world around him seemed to fade. The crowd, the noise, the years of pain, all gone. It was just him, and the horse, a broken man, and a creature no one believed could be tamed. And somehow, they understood each other. Finally, Samuel Carter reached out and touched Thunder's neck. The horse flinched, but didn't strike. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Slowly, carefully, Samuel Carter placed his foot into the stirrup. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. Every doubt from the crowd echoed in the wind. But he pushed through, with one final effort. He pulled himself up onto Thunder's back. For a second, everything was still, and then Thunder exploded. The horse bucked violently, twisting, kicking, trying to throw him off. The crowd screamed as Samuel Carter held on, his fragile body being tossed like a rag in the storm. Seconds passed. Then more. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. "Hold on," someone shouted. But Samuel Carter wasn't just holding on. He was remembering. The rhythm, the balance, the connection. Tears filled his eyes as he leaned forward slightly, gripping tighter, whispering again, "I'm still here." Thunder's movements began to change. The wild chaos, slowly, began to soften. The horse's fury turned into resistance, then confusion. And then, something no one expected. Thunder stopped. The arena fell completely silent. The powerful black stallion stood still, breathing heavily. And on his back, still holding on, was Samuel Carter. The same man everyone had called weak. The same man no one believed in. And yet, in that moment, he had done the impossible. But as the silence lingered, something unexpected happened. Samuel Carter's grip loosened slightly. His body swayed, and from the corner of the arena, a woman's voice suddenly cried out, "Samuel!" The sound hit him like a memory from another lifetime. His eyes widened, his balance shifted, and just as Thunder took a sudden step forward, Samuel Carter began to fall. Samuel Carter began to fall. The world seemed to slow, as if time itself refused to let the moment pass too quickly. His fingers slipped from the reins, his frail body tilting sideways, weightless for a brief, terrifying second. Gasps erupted from the crowd. "Someone catch him," a voice shouted, but no one was close enough. Samuel Carter hit the ground hard, the impact sending a dull thud through the arena. Dust rose around him, swallowing him in a cloud of silence. Thunder reared slightly, stomping once, but didn't run, didn't attack. Instead, the massive stallion stood still, its wild eyes no longer burning with rage, but something quieter, something uncertain. The entire crowd froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then the same voice screamed again, "Samuel!" A woman pushed through the crowd, her face pale, her eyes filled with panic and something deeper, something old. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she gently lifted his head. "Samuel, can you hear me?" Samuel Carter's eyes fluttered slightly. The pain was sharp, spreading through his ribs, his back. His whole body felt like it had shattered. But that voice, it pulled him back. He forced his eyes open. Blurred shapes slowly formed into a face he hadn't seen in years. "Elena," he whispered, his voice barely there. Tears rolled down her cheeks instantly. "Yes, it's me. I'm here," Elena Carter said, her voice breaking. The crowd murmured in confusion. Some whispered, "Carter? She knows him?" But none of that mattered. For Samuel Carter, the arena was gone. The years were gone. It was just him. "You left," he said weakly, his breath uneven. Elena shook her head quickly, gripping his hand tighter. "No, Samuel, I didn't leave you. You pushed everyone away. After Margaret passed, you shut the world out, even me." Her voice carried both pain and truth. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. He remembered the loneliness, the anger, the way he had buried himself in silence, refusing help, refusing love, until there was nothing left but emptiness. "I thought I had nothing left to give," he whispered. Elena leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching his. "You were wrong," she said softly. "You still don't see it, do you?" Before he could respond, a sudden movement drew everyone's attention. Thunder, the massive stallion, slowly walked forward. Each step was heavy, deliberate. The crowd instinctively stepped back, fear returning to their faces. "Get that horse away!" someone yelled. But Thunder didn't charge, didn't lash out. Instead, he approached Samuel Carter. Elena froze, her breath catching. "Don't move," someone whispered from behind. But Samuel, he didn't feel fear. He turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting the horse's. Thunder lowered its head slowly, gently, until its muzzle was just inches from Samuel's shoulder. And then, it stopped. The same wild creature that had terrified everyone now stood quietly beside the man who had dared to understand it. A deep silence spread across the arena. Even the wind seemed to pause. Samuel Carter let out a weak breath, a faint, tired smile forming on his lips. "Guess he's not so dangerous after all," he murmured. A few people in the crowd lowered their heads, shame creeping into their expressions. The same men who had laughed earlier now stood speechless. One of them muttered quietly, "We were wrong about him." Another nodded slowly, "Yeah, we were." The announcer, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward, his voice no longer loud and theatrical, but filled with awe. "I'd never seen anything like this," he said. "Ladies and gentlemen, Samuel Carter has done what no one else could. He rode thunder, and more than that, he reached him." A wave of applause slowly began to rise. Not loud at first, not forced, but real, deep, respectful. It grew stronger, spreading through the entire crowd. Samuel Carter closed his eyes for a moment as the sound filled the air. Not because of the applause, but because, for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel weak. He didn't feel forgotten. Elena squeezed his hand gently. "You see that?" she whispered. "They're not laughing anymore." Samuel let out a faint chuckle, though it hurt. "Took them long enough," he said. She smiled through her tears. "Better late than never." A group of medics rushed in, carefully lifting Samuel onto a stretcher. He winced in pain, but his eyes remained calm, peaceful in a way they hadn't been in years. As they carried him away, Thunder let out a low, deep sound. Not a roar, not a cry, but something softer, almost like a goodbye. Samuel turned his head slightly, just enough to see the horse one last time. "Take care of him," he said weakly, though he wasn't sure who he was speaking to. Maybe the handlers. Maybe the world. Or maybe Thunder himself. Elena walked beside the stretcher, refusing to let go of his hand. "You're not going anywhere alone this time," she said firmly. Samuel looked at her, a quiet realization settling in his heart. For years he had believed he had lost everything, but maybe he had only lost his way. As they reached the edge of the arena, the applause still echoing behind them, Samuel Carter whispered something so soft that only Elena could hear. "Do you think it's too late for me?" Elena stopped for a second, looking down at him with a steady, unwavering gaze. "No, Samuel," she said gently. "It's not too late. Not while you're still breathing." Samuel closed his eyes again, holding onto her hand just a little tighter, and somewhere behind them, Thunder stood still, watching, not wild anymore, not alone anymore. Just like the man who had finally proven. He was never as weak as the world believed, but as the stretcher was loaded into the ambulance, and the doors slowly began to close, one of the handlers ran forward, shouting urgently, "Wait, you need to hear this." Elena turned sharply. "What is it?" The man was slightly out of breath, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That horse, Thunder, he won't let anyone near him now." Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" The handler swallowed hard. "He's calm, but the moment anyone else tries to touch him, he reacts. Not violently, just refuses." He paused, then added quietly, "It's like he's waiting for Samuel." The handler's words hung in the air like something unfinished, something that refused to settle. Elena's grip on Samuel's hand tightened as she glanced back toward the arena, her heart caught between fear and something she couldn't quite explain. Inside the ambulance, the paramedic was checking Samuel's pulse, adjusting an oxygen mask over his face. "He needs to go, now," the paramedic said firmly. But Samuel's eyes, they slowly opened again. "We can't leave him," he whispered faintly. Elena leaned closer. "Samuel, you're hurt. You need treatment." Samuel shook his head weakly, his voice trembling but stubborn. "He'll think I left him too." Elena froze. For a second she didn't see the old man lying on the stretcher. She saw the younger Samuel, the one who never walked away from anything he loved. The paramedic sighed, clearly frustrated. "Ma'am, we don't have time for this." Elena looked between the paramedic and Samuel. Then she made a decision. "Give us 2 minutes," she said. Before the paramedic could argue, she turned and stepped out of the ambulance, her eyes scanning the arena. "Bring the horse closer," she called out. The handlers hesitated. "You saw what happened," one of them said. "We can't risk it." Elena didn't back down. "He's not dangerous," she said firmly. "Not to him." There was something in her voice, something certain, that made them pause. Slowly, cautiously, they led Thunder closer. The massive stallion walked with controlled steps, its energy no longer explosive, but focused. Its eyes were searching, waiting. The crowd, which had begun to disperse, gathered again, drawn back by something they didn't fully understand. The ambulance doors remained open. Samuel struggled slightly, trying to sit up despite the pain shooting through his body. "Easy," the paramedic said, trying to hold him down. "No," Samuel muttered. "Just help me sit." Reluctantly they adjusted him, propping him up just enough. And then Thunder came into view. The moment the horse saw him, it stopped. Completely still. A deep, quiet recognition passed between them. Samuel's breathing slowed. "There you are," he whispered. Elena stepped back slightly, giving space. Though her heart was racing, no one spoke, no one moved. Samuel slowly lifted his trembling hand, It barely rose halfway before the weakness took over, but he didn't need to reach further. Thunder took a step forward, then another, until the stallion stood right beside the ambulance, and then, gently, almost impossibly gently, Thunder lowered his head, resting it against the edge of the stretcher. A collective breath escaped from the crowd. Some people covered their mouths, others simply stared, unable to process what they were witnessing. Samuel's fingers found the horse's mane, gripping it lightly. "I didn't leave," he murmured. "I'm still here." Thunder exhaled deeply, a low, calming sound vibrating through its chest. For a moment, there was no pain, no crowd, no past, just a broken man, and a once wild creature, finding something they had both lost. Connection. Trust. Belonging. Elena wiped her tears quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I think he understands you better than people ever did." Samuel gave the faintest smile. "Maybe that's why he listens." The paramedic stepped forward again, softer this time. "Sir, we really need to go now." Samuel nodded slowly. He looked into Thunder's eyes one last time, something unspoken passing between them. Then he whispered, "Wait for me." The horse didn't move, didn't react, but somehow, it felt like a promise had been made. The handlers carefully stepped forward, gently guiding Thunder back. For once, the stallion didn't resist, not because it was tamed, but because it trusted. The ambulance doors slowly closed, and as they did, Samuel's hand slipped from the edge, his strength finally giving in. Inside, the sirens started. The vehicle pulled away, dust rising behind it. Elena sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. Samuel didn't respond immediately. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow but steady. After a long pause, he spoke. "I felt it again." Elena leaned closer. "Felt what?" "That purpose," he said, "like I wasn't finished yet." Elena's eyes softened. "You're not," she said firmly. "You never were." The ambulance sped down the empty road, the town slowly fading behind them, but back at the arena, Thunder stood still, long after the crowd had gone quiet. Long after the dust had settled, the stallion remained near the same spot, watching the road where the ambulance disappeared. Waiting. Hours later. The hospital room was quiet, filled with the soft beeping of machines and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Samuel Carter lay in bed, bandaged, bruised, but alive. Elena sat beside him, her head resting against the edge of the bed, exhausted but unwilling to leave. A doctor stepped in, checking the chart. "He's lucky," the doctor said. "A few broken ribs, some internal bruising, but for someone his age—" He paused, shaking his head slightly. "It's remarkable." Elena gave a small, tired smile. "He's stronger than he looks." The doctor nodded. "I can see that." As the doctor left, silence returned. Samuel's eyes slowly opened again. "Elena," he whispered. She lifted her head immediately. He looked around the room, taking in the unfamiliar space. "We made it?" She smiled gently. "Yeah, you did." Samuel exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting toward the window. Night had fallen. The world outside was dark, quiet, but his thoughts weren't. "They'll sell him," Samuel said suddenly. Elena frowned. "Who?" "Thunder," he replied. "They'll treat him like a prize, like something to control or break." There was pain in his voice, not physical, deeper. Elena hesitated. "You don't know that for sure." Samuel turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes. "I do." Silence settled again, heavy, real. Elena could see it now. This wasn't just about a horse. It was about him, about everything he had lost, everything he had been forced to let go. She took a deep breath. "Then don't let them," she said quietly. Samuel blinked. "What?" "If you believe that, then do something about it," she continued. "You didn't just ride that horse today, Samuel. You reached him. Everyone saw it." Her voice grew stronger. "You think that was an accident?" Samuel didn't answer, but something shifted in his expression, a thought, a possibility. Elena leaned closer. "Maybe this isn't just a second chance for you," she said softly. "Maybe it's his too." Samuel stared at her, his heart beating a little faster despite the pain. Outside, the wind whispered against the glass. Inside, something long buried began to rise again. Hope. But before Samuel could speak again, a sudden knock came at the door. Elena turned. "Come in." The door slowly opened, and standing there was one of the handlers from the arena. His face looked serious, almost troubled. "I'm sorry to come this late," he said, "but there's something you need to know." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. "What is it?" The man stepped inside, hesitating for a brief moment before speaking. "They've already made an offer for Thunder." He paused, then added, "And the people who want him." aren't the kind who care about what you did today." The room seemed to grow colder. Elena's expression tightened instantly. "What do you mean by that?" The handler stepped further inside, closing the door quietly behind him as if the truth he carried shouldn't be heard by anyone else. "I mean," he said carefully, "they're not interested in connection or trust. They see him as a challenge, a beast to break." Samuel Carter's jaw tightened despite the pain running through his body. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The handler hesitated, then finally said, "A private buyer. Name's Victor Hale." The name landed heavy. Elena frowned. "I've heard of him." The handler nodded grimly. "Most people have. He runs a chain of high-stakes rodeo circuits, but behind the scenes—" He paused, choosing his words. "His methods are cruel." Samuel's fingers curled slightly against the blanket. "What kind of cruel?" he asked. The handler swallowed. "Electric prods, starvation, isolation. He breaks horses until they obey or collapse trying." A deep silence filled the room. Elena looked back at Samuel, fear creeping into her eyes. "No, we can't let that happen." Samuel didn't respond immediately. His gaze had drifted again, but this time it wasn't distant. It was focused, sharp in a way it hadn't been in years. "He trusted me," Samuel said quietly. The handler nodded. "That's why I came. After what happened today, it didn't feel right staying quiet." Elena stepped closer to the bed. "Is there anything we can do? Can we stop the sale?" The handler sighed. "Technically, Thunder belongs to the ranch that entered him into the competition. They're in debt. This sale could save them." Samuel let out a slow breath. "So it's money," he murmured. "It's always money." Elena shook her head. "There has to be another way." The handler looked between them. "There might be," he said carefully. Both Samuel and Elena looked at him. "If someone else makes a better offer, before the deal is finalized tomorrow morning, they could take ownership." Elena blinked. "Tomorrow?" He nodded. "Victor Hale's people are coming at sunrise." The room fell silent again. Samuel let his head rest back against the pillow, his body weak, but his mind racing. "How much?" he asked. The handler hesitated again. "More than most people around here could ever afford." Elena stepped closer. "Just tell us." $50,000. The number hit hard. Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping. "That's," she whispered, unable to finish. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment. 50,000 years ago. It would have been possible, but now, he barely had enough to survive day by day. "I don't have it," he said plainly. The truth sat heavy in the room. The handler nodded slowly. "I figured, but I thought you should know. After today, it felt like that horse chose you." Samuel opened his eyes again, staring at the ceiling. "Chose you." The words echoed. For so long, life had taken things from him without asking. His home, his family, his purpose. And now, something had finally chosen him. Something had looked at him. Not as weak, not as broken, but as worthy. And it was about to be taken away. Again, Elena stepped closer, her voice soft but urgent. "Samuel, look at me." He turned his head slightly. "We'll figure something out," she said. "We have to." Samuel studied her face. There was determination there, the kind he remembered from years ago, the kind he had once pushed away. "You always believed things could work out," he said faintly. Elena gave a small, sad smile. "And you always stopped believing too soon." That hit deeper than anything else. Samuel looked away again, his chest rising slowly as he thought. Outside the window the night stretched on, quiet, endless. Then suddenly, Samuel shifted, wincing in pain as he tried to sit up straighter. "Hey, careful," Elena said quickly, moving to support him, but Samuel shook his head. His voice was different now, not weak, not defeated, determined. "There's still time before morning," he said. The handler frowned. "Yeah, but not much." Samuel looked at him directly. "That ranch, the one that owns Thunder, who runs it now?" "Daniel Reeves," the handler replied. "Why?" Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. "I knew his father," he said. "Good man, honest." The handler shrugged. "Daniel's different. Struggling, that's why he's selling." Samuel nodded slowly, as if piecing something together. "Then maybe he doesn't want to sell," Samuel said. "Maybe he just thinks he has no choice." Elena's eyes lit up slightly. "You think you can convince him?" Samuel took a slow breath. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I have to try." The handler looked uncertain. "You can barely move." Samuel gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Wouldn't be the first time I did something people thought I couldn't." Elena couldn't help it. She smiled too, though her eyes were still filled with worry. "Even if you talk to him, what if he refuses?" she asked. Samuel looked at her. "Then I'll find another way," he said. "Like what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the window again, toward the darkness, toward the direction of the town. I've spent years thinking I had nothing left, he said quietly, but maybe I was wrong. Elena studied him carefully. What are you thinking, Samuel? He turned back to her. If money is what stands between that horse and freedom, he said slowly, then I'll find it. The handler raised an eyebrow. Overnight? Samuel didn't blink. Yes. Silence followed, not disbelief this time. Something else. Tension. Possibility. Elena felt her heart start to race. What are you planning? She asked. Samuel's gaze sharpened again, something old and fearless returning to his eyes. The one thing I should have done a long time ago, he said. And what's that? Samuel Carter took a slow breath and answered, I'm going back to the ranch. I'm going back to the ranch. The words didn't sound like a plan. They sounded like a decision. Final. Unshakable. Elena stared at him, searching his face for doubt, but there was none, only that same quiet fire she had just begun to recognize again. Samuel, it's the middle of the night. You're injured. You can't just— Yes, I can, he interrupted gently but firmly. Even the handler looked unsure now. The ranch is at least 40 minutes from here, and you're in no condition to— Samuel slowly swung his legs toward the side of the bed. Pain shot through him like lightning. His body trembled, but he didn't stop. For years his weakness had been real, but tonight it felt like a choice, and he was done choosing it. Elena quickly moved to support him. If you're going, I'm coming with you. Samuel looked at her. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then he nodded. All right, he said. The handler exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Then I'll drive. Within minutes, against all logic and every doctor's instruction, Samuel Carter was being helped out of the hospital, step by step, pain with every breath, but something stronger pushing him forward, purpose. The night air was cold as they stepped outside. The world was quiet, wrapped in darkness, as if holding its breath for what was about to happen. They got into the handler's old pickup truck. The engine started with a rough growl, and then they drove. The road stretched endlessly ahead, headlights cutting through the darkness. No one spoke much. There was nothing to say. This wasn't about words anymore. It was about what a man does when he decides he's not finished. After what felt like both minutes and hours, the truck finally turned onto a long dirt path. The ranch came into view, familiar, painfully familiar. Samuel's eyes softened as he looked out the window. This place, he whispered. Memories flooded back, not just of loss, but of who he used to be. The truck stopped. Elena stepped out first, then helped Samuel down carefully. His legs nearly gave out, but he steadied himself. You all right? She asked. He nodded. I am now. A light was on inside the main house. Someone was awake. Good. Samuel took a slow breath, then started walking. Each step was heavy, but certain. The handler knocked on the door. A few seconds later, it opened. A man in his 40s stood there, tired eyes, worn expression. Daniel Reeves. What is this? Daniel asked, confused. Do you know what time it? Then he saw Samuel. His expression shifted. Samuel Carter? He said, surprised. Samuel gave a small nod. Evening, Daniel. Daniel stepped outside slowly, looking between all of them. I heard what you did today, he said. Didn't think I'd see you standing here tonight. Samuel let out a quiet breath. I didn't come to talk about that. Daniel crossed his arms. Then what did you come for? Samuel looked him straight in the eye. Don't sell the horse. Silence. Daniel blinked, then let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You came all the way here. In your condition, to tell me that. Yes, Daniel shook his head. You don't understand. I don't have a choice. You do, Samuel replied. No, I don't, Daniel snapped, his frustration finally surfacing. This ranch is drowning. Debts, bills, everything's falling apart. That horse is the only thing worth enough to keep this place alive. Samuel stepped closer. I've been where you are, he said quietly. Daniel scoffed. Have you? Yes, Samuel answered, and I made the wrong choice. That made Daniel pause. Samuel continued, his voice steady. I let everything go, piece by piece, because I thought I had no other way, and in the end, I didn't just lose my ranch. He looked around slowly. I lost myself. The words hit harder than anger ever could. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly. But this isn't about me, Samuel said. It's about that horse. Daniel's jaw tightened. It's just an animal. Samuel shook his head. No, he said. He's more than that, and you know it. Silence again. The wind moved softly through the trees. Daniel looked away, conflicted. You think I want to sell him? He muttered. You think I don't see what he is? Samuel said nothing because he knew. Daniel ran a hand over his face. I just don't have another option. Samuel took a deep breath. Yes, you do, he said. Daniel looked back at him. What? Samuel's voice didn't waver. Let me train him. Elena's eyes widened slightly. The handler blinked. Daniel frowned. What? Give me a chance, Samuel said, not to break him, but to work with him properly. Daniel stared at him like he'd lost his mind. And then what? Samuel met his gaze. We enter him into bigger competitions, he said. Real ones. The kind that pay more than quick sales. Daniel hesitated. That takes time and money. Samuel nodded. Then we earn it. Daniel let out a breath. You're asking me to risk everything. On you. Samuel didn't look away. No, he said quietly. I'm asking you to believe just once that there's a better way than giving up. The words settled deep, long. Daniel looked past Samuel, toward the stables, toward where Thunder was kept. For a long moment he said nothing, then finally, You really think you can do it? He asked. Samuel didn't hesitate. I know I can. Another long pause, then Daniel exhaled slowly, like a man standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. All right, he said. Elena's breath caught. Daniel looked directly at Samuel. One chance, he added. That's all I'm giving you. Samuel's shoulders lowered slightly. Not from weakness this time, but from relief. That's all I need. And just like that, everything changed. Morning came slowly. The sun rose over the ranch, casting light across the fields once again. But this time, something was different. Samuel Carter stood near the stable, bruised, exhausted, but alive in a way he hadn't been for years. Thunder stood inside, waiting. Samuel stepped forward. No fear, no doubt, just understanding. The gate opened, and once again, it was just the two of them. A man the world had called weak, and a creature the world had called dangerous. Both misunderstood, both broken, both given one last chance. Samuel reached out slowly. Let's do this right, he whispered. Thunder didn't pull away. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. It wasn't easy. There were falls, setbacks, moments where pain, physical and emotional, almost made Samuel quit. But he didn't, because this time, he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something bigger, redemption, and Thunder. He changed too, not into something controlled, but something powerful and free, with purpose. The day finally came, a bigger arena, a bigger crowd, higher stakes, and when Samuel Carter rode Thunder again, there was no chaos, no fear, only connection, only trust, and when it ended, there was no doubt. They had won. Not just the competition, but something far greater, respect. A second chance, a new beginning. Months later, the ranch was alive again, stronger than before. Elena stood by the fence watching as Samuel worked with another young horse, his movements calm, confident, whole. Daniel approached her, shaking his head slightly with a smile. I almost sold everything, he said. Elena smiled softly. But you didn't. Daniel nodded. Because of him. They both looked at Samuel, the man no one believed in, the man everyone called weak, the man who proved them all wrong, not by force, but by heart, and somewhere in the field, Thunder ran free, not owned, not broken, just understood. And that made all the difference, because sometimes the world will tell you you're too weak, too late, too broken. But the truth is, you're only one decision away from changing everything. So if you're standing at your lowest point right now, if the world has already decided what you're worth, ask yourself this: are you really finished? Or are you just getting started?